Hi everybody, and welcome back to My Third Act. I'm Marla. This is my new channel, and I thought I would do a series of videos on things that I just reminisce about so fondly. One of my business mentors said, quit reminiscing over the good old days because they probably weren't nearly as good as you remember them. I just have to disagree. I think it's so fun to take a few things and that were fun and just think about them. It makes me just laugh and be joyful about some things that you can only capture in your memories. You can't relive it again. So one of the things that I love is little fashion, and this is, let's see if I can get a better picture of it. This is a Joseph Ribicoff coat that I also love bargains. I will pay full price for something I really love, but I got this at a consignment store for $35. I mean, look at the cuffs. And I found this little ring and put it on. It was so fun. I guess I shouldn't wear this watch with this. It's probably too sporty. But this is a fabulous coat, and I wear it a lot. At the holidays, I'll throw it on over something. There's not even any lining in it. So how did I start loving fashion? You might remember this. Did your mom sew? My mother was an incredible seamstress. My mom's still alive, but she doesn't sew anymore. She was an incredible seamstress, but she always looked cute too as I was growing up, and so did her mother, my grandmother. They just had cute little figures. They always had their hair done. And y'all, I grew up in the country. My grandmother would be driving grain trucks, especially during harvest season. She was milking cows. And my granddaddy too. I mean, they just worked hand in hand on everything together. Sadly, they're both gone, but man, I was the first grandchild, and they were 38 and 39 years old when I was born. My mother was 17 when I was born, and she was 16 when she got married. So there you go. I just was able to spend a lot of fabulous time. Anyway, my grandmother and my mother always looked cute, and they would sew their clothing and have lots of rickrack on it and tight-waisted things with lots of full skirts and lots of top stitching, especially into the 60s and 70s, especially the 70s. Tons of top stitching on the suits that they made. A lot of suits out of double knit fabric. We were so excited when double knit fabric was invented because it wasn't even breathable. I mean, you couldn't hardly kill that stuff. It was like the Twinkie of fabrics. Double knit fabric, it was really thick, it was really hot, and it was just practically indestructible. Anyway, so my mother, when she was about, I guess, 20, so I would have been 3 or 4, maybe she was 21 or 22, for her birthday, her mother bought her a Singer Slantomatic 500 sewing machine. I probably have a picture of it somewhere if I could find it. But those of you who sew and you're in your 60s, I'm 69, I'll be 70 this year. I grew up watching my mother sew. My mother became addicted to sewing. And she had 2 girls, no boys. So she got to practice everything on us. Fortunately, my mother was an excellent seamstress. We would spend hours. You know how most kids would remember going shopping with their parents, and they might go to might go to a clothing store, a shoe store, a big department store like Montgomery Ward or Sears. No. We went to fabric stores. Hancock Fabric in Albuquerque, oh my Lord. Like I just might as well, me and Granddaddy, we'd just sit down and talk for hours, sit on the bench outside the store, go and get an ice cream, go and get a Coca-Cola, come back and see what the ladies were doing, go have some more fun together, come back. It was hours and hours and hours of looking at fabric. My mother could look at a piece of fabric and she could deduce how it would lay in a dress or in a shirt or in pants, how it would crease, what the quality was, how much she needed to match up the plaids or to make plaids or match up the stripes, and what kind of pattern it would look best as. So we'd also spend hours and hours going through all of the pattern books, Simplicity, Butterick, Vogue, and Mom and my grandmother made me some nice Vogue patterns for when I was in a theater group in my teens. Because, for example, I actually had a coat, something kind of similar to this. Gosh, I bet I don't have it anymore. That was a Vogue pattern. It was all a silk satin long cape that had ruffles all around it. And I was Amy in Little Women, and I got to wear that when Amy came back from Paris, and they made me a light pink blouse that went under it that had massive amounts of ruffles all up and down the sleeves. And my grandmother would come over and they'd spend hours sewing those together. My mother had a big cutting board set up, which is, just cardboard, set up on a table. And that was actually, before that, we just used the kitchen table as the cutting board. And my mother, every day when I came in from school, my mother would be sewing. Or at least when she got off of work, she would be sewing. I just believe my mother sewed almost every day of my life from the time she got that Singer's Landomatic 500. She sewed and sewed and sewed. And every now and then when I'm looking through, and my mother, even when we lived in the country, then we moved into town in New Mexico, little town in Texas and a little town in New Mexico. My mother always had her hair done, and she always put on some makeup every morning, even living in the country. And she'd wear these cute little top pedal pushers and a little blouse that she had made that had lots of darts. When when Mom and I would look through pictures when I got older, she'd look at a picture fondly and she'd say, you know what? That's a dress that I actually bought. So my grandmother and my mother would go to town on a Saturday, and they dressed up so cute. And then after I was born, they would make me cute clothes, and they would take me downtown. And of course, everyone shopped on Main Street then. And there's my dog shaking. We would go up and down Main Street into all the stores, especially spending time in the fabric stores, but there weren't so many on Main Street there. And they would have on their cute little outfits, and they'd look so pretty, and they'd all talk about their different patterns that they used to make their outfits. And then my granddaddy and my mother would spend time reading to me, especially Mother Goose nursery rhymes from the time I was about, 12 months old. So by the time I turned 2, I had memorized dozens of Mother Goose nursery rhymes, dozens. So when my mother and my grandmother, and a lot of times my granddaddy, and he always looked so sharp. He'd have on his pressed khakis and his starched white shirt. My grandmother would starch everything in that faultless blue, you'd heat up a pan of water and put that, I think it was faultless starch in there, and it'd be all thick and gluey, and it'd bubble up and go, and you'd put it in when I was really little, she'd roll out the washing machine and put that starch in there when it was time to starch the clothes, and then she'd roll them through the roller. Of course, soon after that, she got a washing machine, but my grandmother did have a really nice pressing iron on her service porch by where washer and dryer were in the later days. So everybody always had, granddaddy and great always looked, my grandmother, sorry. So my granddaddy and my grandmother always looked so cute when they would go to town. And granddaddy would have on his pressed khakis and his starched and pressed white shirt. Grandtate would have on her beautiful dress, tied at the waist, lots of ruffles in it. Often, I always remember my mom and my grandmother wearing high heels to shop in. I don't mean little high heels. I mean what we would call spike heels to shop in. At least during the 60s, I remember that. Maybe in the 70s, they got those shorter, chunkier heels, which came in style. But my grandparents also, especially granddaddy, had always cute sunglasses, and they would wear these Foster Grants. So when I was about 2, I guess, my grandparents took my mother's 3 younger brothers. Mother couldn't go because I was already born and she was at home with the baby. They all drove out to Yellowstone National Park, and they took tons and tons of pictures that they had put on slides. So later, my grandparents' house burned down. It was so sad. but we salvaged some of the slides. I don't know who has them right now. It's not me. But you would see all of these pictures of people walking around Yellowstone, and my grandmother and my granddaddy would have on matching outfits, and my grandmother would make herself Bermuda shorts and matching shirts all pressed, and granddaddy's shirts, and then they'd have on their foster grants, and my grandmother wore kids shoes, tennis shoes with little white socks, and she had lots of different kids to match her outfits. So I think that my grandmother probably only took maybe 5 outfits that she had sewn out to Yellowstone, and they were gone for a couple of weeks, but she mixed and matched, and they were so heavily starched that they lasted the whole trip. You could sweat in those clothes and they would still probably stand up on their own. Those were just the days. But then pretty soon there wasn't as much reason to sew anymore, because all the manufacturing moved overseas, and little teeny tiny children were making all those clothes for really cheap, and suddenly it wasn't enough to have 2 or 3 or 4 pair of jeans. We had to have 20, 30 pair of jeans and just as many pair of shoes. And so the art of sewing kind of went bye-bye, kind of like home ec classes. Maybe there's home ec classes again. But I just wanted to share that with you guys. I wish you would leave me some comments about if maybe you sew yourself, what your favorite patterns were like, what your favorite clothes were like, and also, did you make clothes for your kids and grandkids' dolls? My mom and my grandmother made tons of gorgeous dresses for my Barbies and my midges and my midge dolls and my Ken dolls, and they have little teeny tiny darts, and there was no Velcro in, so they'd all have little teeny tiny snaps that you would snap them all together, and then they'd have petticoats out of petticoat material, and just unbelievable. I don't have those left either. My mother gave them away, and she rules the day that she gave away all of those Barbie, Midge, and Ken clothes. But she did. I don't have a one of them, but I remember them. All right, guys, let me know your sewing stories and how they interpret today in your view of fashion. Okie doke. Y'all make it a winning day. Have a good one.